Welcome to the Pinch to Zoom podcast, the show where we zoom in on the latest tech products, news, and trends. I'm Stetson.
I'm Gabe.
And in this episode, we're focusing on the new smartphones in 2020 from the latest smartphone manufacturers and the biggest releases we're expecting. But first, Gabe, what is some unsolicited tech advice you have for our listeners? I think it'd be good to start off. You know, we love tech. Is there a product you've been using in the past couple of weeks that you want to give a shout out to?
My tech tip would be selling on Facebook Marketplace. I have been doing this a lot as I plan to move out to LA, decluttering, getting rid of some old products. And Facebook Marketplace is actually one of the best things I think about Facebook. It's like a improved Craigslist, not quite as scary, but still the advantage of not paying a percentage to eBay or PayPal or something like that, and also not having to ship a product. So that's my unsolicited tech advice. Do you have any from you?
You know, I think I can just piggyback right off of that. My tech advice is if you're looking for a new phone or a new gadget and you're on more of a budget, check out Facebook Marketplace or check out eBay or check out Swappa. Consider buying gently used because you can often get really good deals, even just on last year's tech. And the phone from last year is still phenomenal. It's still got the latest specs and all that, and you can get often a great deal online from someone like Gabe who maybe no longer needs it or is looking to upgrade to the absolute bleeding edge and can afford that kind of thing. So I think those go together. Sell your old stuff online and then consider buying it from one of those used marketplaces as well for win-win situations all around.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's always new stuff coming out. It's hard to stay upgraded to it, so maybe just buy something that you know will work and then stay with that for a while. But it is February now. We're already January 1/12 of the year has gone by. We have Mobile World Congress coming up, so that's why we're talking about cell phones in this episode. It'll be very exciting this month, seeing all the Android phones come out and possibly some leaks on the new iPhone 9 coming out in March. But before we do that, I think we should probably talk about some news, right?
Absolutely. The quick news segment is where we dive into the latest news and trends in the past couple of weeks. So let's get into it. This is Quick news.
And before we actually get started, this is a Gen 2. Well, actually, it's a 1.75 build of Quick News. It's a slightly faster processor, a little updated. So we're going to try to speed through this and actually make it really Quick News and not Quick News Extended XL Edition.
Gabe, what do we have first on Quick News?
So first up, you actually might have seen the ad during the Super Bowl. We're recording this before the Super Bowl, but it is the fact that GMC is going to be bringing the Hummer back from the dead, but this time it's electrified. So we're going to possibly see this in 2022, and this will be a truck that is actually going to have 1,000 horsepower, do 0 to 60 in less than 3 seconds, and have that really aggressive military-style Hummer look. So,
any other notes on the Hummer?
I mean, this is obviously something aimed directly at the Tesla Cybertruck. They see that market. Trucks are very, very lucrative. You can have pretty high prices on them, and people will still buy them. But you still get the benefit of all that electric power in there as well. So, keep an eye out for that. That's first thing up on Quick News.
Quick news. All right, second thing up, Canon. We have a new rumored camera from Canon. This is the EOS R5. So this is anticipated to be announced on February 13th. It's packing super beefy specs. For those of you unfamiliar, the Canon EOS R was their first mirrorless camera, full-frame mirrorless camera. It was pretty good for photography, but for video, it really lacked. So the EOS R5, new rumored release, packing huge video specs. We're talking 8K 30 frames per second, 4K 120 frames per second, built-in Wi-Fi, new battery, launching July 2020, and it's going to be a 45 megapixel full-frame sensor with IBIS. It's going to be epic.
Yeah, definitely look forward to seeing that. These are all just rumored specs, so keep an eye out for that when it comes out in February. But I'm really excited for that. Would you be picking this up for any price, Stetson?
Gabe, I would be dreaming about it given these specs and what this camera could be packing. But of course, I think the best thing at this point is to wait and see what comes out. And I think we have some other tech news from another camera, but this one flies.
Yeah, this one's kind of like a pour one out for Autel, their EVO II drone. It looks like history is repeating itself. You know, they have had production issues in the past. I know the Autel EVO, they originally announced it would have a 1-inch sensor version. We never saw that come to the light of day. And this time it looks like the Autel EVO II is getting pushed back a little bit, and we'll see how much that actually is going to be. They actually sent out an email and a Facebook post to their, followers and such, saying like, yeah, we really appreciate the support and everything. However, we're having a software glitch, and we don't want to push out a first day software update to all our people who purchase it. So we're actually going to push back the expected ship date and order date to March, which is a pretty big deal when considering how fast drone tech moves and stuff. And with DJI, trying to come out with the drone to follow up and match this. Yeah, it doesn't look too good. And I've always held this thing with any new drone companies or drone companies really trying to expand is don't count your drones before they hatch. As in, don't think that this thing is actually going to be as good as they say it is until you actually have it in your hands or have seen a lot of people flying it.
Yeah, that's it. That's quick news version 1.75.
Yeah,
hope
I think that's
you
what
enjoyed
it was.
it. And I think we should just dive right into the main topic, right? The main topic, the upcoming smartphones in 2020. And Gabe, yeah, as you mentioned, we have Mobile World Congress coming up, typically a time where a lot of manufacturers showcase the latest tech that they're putting into their phones and the new release dates. Typically only Android phones, I guess, because Apple does their own thing. But still exciting because we get more budget phones. We get some interesting phones from like Nokia and other manufacturers you may typically hear less about. And then we also have, does Samsung release phones there? Like maybe
Samsung usually does a release prior to Mobile World Congress, which is what we're going to see this year. I think it's February 11th. They're having their Samsung Unpacked event.
Samsung Unpacked, yeah, okay.
So that is, phones are pretty nice for reporting news on because they're very regular. Their release schedule, it's pretty much like iPhone. We get that in the fall. Sometimes September. We get a Pixel in the fall. We get Samsung in the early spring in like February or March, and then we get one of them in August. It's very regular, every year updates. But it's interesting because there's trends that, kind of will dictate the full year or, maybe for a company, their new smartphones will fall, all right, we're going to go with bigger cameras or we're going to go with better screens. And all kind of will, ripple through the whole industry or the whole generation of smartphones.
It's almost challenging, though, because often with these phones, the manufacturers have been working on them and developing them well before they're actually announced. So they reach a point where they can't really pivot the design. And it's interesting to me that we actually do see these trends because that typically means like manufacturers have been working on similar ideas almost alongside each other. And it's kind of interesting to see how the tech trickles out. Gabe, before we get into this, like what were some past trends we've seen and what do you think the trend will be this year for smartphones?
Well, that's two very different questions, but let's go at past trends. I think just going back in the past like 4 or 5 years, we've seen the biggest thing I think is the thing you first see when you pick up your phone is it's gotten bigger. But when you first going to unlock it, we've also seen, it's gone from a fingerprint. Well, first, I guess it was touchscreen when you just would swipe
right, you would have like your
passcode.
4 numbers. You remember like you'd get your muscle memory down just counting
so fast.
those numbers in.
Or,
oh my gosh.
And then you had to go to 6 numbers. So
it's such a time waste thinking about it now. Like I never put that in.
Yeah. I mean, well, sometimes it'll pop up and it'll say you need to enter it in order to enable the touch or face ID. But yeah, so we went from, unlocking with a simple passcode, which is essentially just, your ordinary like combination lock just digitized, to then we went to a fingerprint. And now we have Face ID as well as fingerprint, which is slightly more advanced now, with like in-display and stuff like that.
It's true, yeah. We basically went from, standardized passcodes to biometrics. I guess the other thing, like, if you think about smartphones in a longer, like, 10-year time period, we kind of started out with these LCD screens, and then those turned into LCD touchscreens, and then we got OLED displays, and pretty much OLED is I want to say for the most part, dominating the market. But there were some interesting articles about micro LED and Apple possibly working to develop those, and we could see that.
It's true, and also
out.
not only the screen like lighting technology, but the screen itself. If you've gone back and used any of those older smartphones, I mean they're plasticky. They feel so like cheap. It's amazing how premium and like good these screens are we're using now.
Yeah, and I think the iPhone 4 to me kind of started that with the Retina display, and then all of a sudden like we got super high pixel density displays in phones. That was dramatic transformation, and yeah, I think those are some of the past trends we've seen, and I guess wireless charging. Samsung, I want to say Samsung pioneered that.
Well, it's weird because wireless charging has been around for, I mean,
an embarrassing amount of time, considering how long I haven't used it.
I remember Qi, like the standard being introduced back in like 2012, 2013, but iPhones only have gotten that in the past, 4 years, 3 years?
It was even, I think, 3 years. It was the iPhone 8, which came out 3 years ago, because it was the 8 and the 10, and then the 10s. Now we're on the 11. So, yeah, those were some of the trends, and we, of course, with the iPhone 7, saw the loss of the headphone jack, and that has, unfortunately, for a lot of people, kind of trickled out to some of these higher-end phones. Oddly, it stays in a lot of the budget phones, so that's kind of interesting.
What would you say is the biggest change and like trend of changes that you've seen of the past, I guess we'll just say 10 years, that's pretty much smartphones, that has been the biggest to you, like in your daily use?
I think the screen is probably the number one. So because when you use a phone, you're staring at the screen, and we went from small screens to kind of edge-to-edge screens to like notched screens. That was a pretty big jump right there.
We're still in that kind of
notched phase. So I think the screen was probably number one. I guess number two is design trend. I feel like before, phones used to be very different, very distinct, their own kind of personalities, and now we're basically like companies are pumping out just glass sandwiches, glass on the front, glass back for that wireless charging, and a lot of phones look really similar. That's my take. Do you have any? Do you agree? Do you have a different trend you would point
I would
to?
say definitely this. Not only the screen quality, but the size. It's the biggest thing for me. It's
the biggest thing because it got bigger, right?
There we go. That's why. Yeah. No, it is really a big usability difference. Using a phone that has like a 6-inch display versus, I recently grabbed up like, an iPhone 5 and just was playing around with it, and oh my gosh, and that phone was considered big at the time. So
I remember that in high school. It was like, oh my god, I have a whole extra row of icons. This is I'm basically holding a theater in my pocket. The screen is so big. And now, like, the entire phone fits inside the screen size of my current phone.
It's really, that's definitely the biggest switch, not only for usability, but for app makers designing their apps. They have more real estate. And because people are consuming so much video content via their phones, it's a lot nicer to stare at a slightly bigger screen than, like, a screen that's the size of a deck of cards.
I would almost say the aspect ratio change was also huge, because we went from the classic 16:9 to all of a sudden, hey, I think, is it 2:1? I think it's just all 2:1 now.
2:1. Well, it's slowly been squeezing out longer and longer.
And I think it's longer than 2:1. It's a little bit taller.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, slowly. It was even less than 16:9 though originally. I thought some of those original phones were almost closer to 4:3. Like rectangular rather than the slightly elongated one. And that actually is a good transition to what we're seeing in the future, because I think one of the things we're going to slowly start to see more is them even get possibly a little bit thinner and longer. I know Essential, which is kind of this fringe company, they teased this phone that, basically looks like, I don't even know, it's like two phones stacked kind of on top of each other. It's so long and thin. It doesn't look like a regular phone at all.
I would describe this as almost like an Apple TV remote.
Yeah,
like
that's that a good
kind
one.
of like, it's that long and it's long, narrow, and thin, and just make that a little bit bigger, like make it a little bit longer and a little bit wider, and like that's what this concept phone looks like. And I think to your point, Gabe, you could be right. It seems like the longer, taller form factor actually seems to work better for our hands. a lot of the interactions and controls have moved down in the interface just towards the bottom of the screen. And with that, you have more real estate for your content, and you can still use it because all the buttons are right there at the bottom. So that's one trend you're thinking we're going to see this year, possibly taller, longer screens.
I think so. I mean, maybe not drastically. Like the Essential phone, I kind of is an extreme concept.
They're doing their own thing.
Yeah, but you kind of have to if you're, not a mainstream company. But I definitely think that, they'll get a little longer, a little taller. I also think we'll continue to see, like you said, the OLED screens and possibly the micro LED screens start to infiltrate.
Yeah, I think I was reading that Apple started, they have their a whole team doing research on, I think it's micro LED. Yeah, micro LED for their Apple Watch. And I think it'll be a couple of years, but soon I could see that coming out to the iPhone and then maybe even the iPad, maybe even their Mac laptops. And that would be huge. I mean, those screens, super high contrast, super vibrant colors. And that would just be an absolute joy to use. But I think, for me, I almost want to say this is the year of 90 hertz or 120 hertz. I think that's really the next big thing in my mind. We've had 60 hertz phones for a while. OnePlus really came out this year, very strong, or I guess last year, 2019, very strong with their OnePlus 7, 7T, and 7T Pro phones. And those all had 90 hertz displays. And using those, it just felt so fast. Like the phone,
well, it's smoother. Everything is quicker to respond. And the reason we're seeing that is most likely because they're finally getting it so it can be power efficient, right?
Yeah, I think so. I hope so. I mean, that's the thing that, like, if you had a choice between a 120 hertz display and better battery life, what do you think you would choose?
Yeah, right. I would probably go with the better battery life, honestly.
That's honestly what I would. Using it would. But I'm using a 60 hertz display refresh now, and it's fine. So
yeah.
I think the better battery life is honestly what I would go for.
I think that's what the companies are also working with. Like they could have probably brought, those faster refresh rate screens a couple years ago, but it would have tanked the battery life.
Like best 10 minutes of your life.
Right, exactly.
Look how smooth Twitter is.
Oh yeah, great. I got enough just to page through 5 tweets and then my battery died. So I think, we saw the Apple Watch this year has that adjustable refresh rate screen. And I think we'll see that at least for Apple, that they're going to bring that to their devices so that, you can, when you're paging through something or you're watching a video possibly or playing a video game, it can be refreshing at that fast rate. But when when your battery starts to get low and you're just, have it sitting there, maybe just reading a news article slowly, it can refresh at a lot slower rate, save you some battery life.
Yeah, I think that will be really important technology. And I think even the Pixel 4 from last year, like Google didn't really say this, but the refresh rate will actually throttle back to 60 hertz.
True,
I think if you're just like the brightness level is under a certain percentage. And I think, okay, another trend I actually want to say is, I don't know if I should put like dual screen phones or folding phones, but I think I'm going to say folding phones. I think 2019 will be the year of folding phones.
2020. Hold on.
Oh yeah, I'm getting my years mixed up because it was last. All right,
were you saying 2019 was the year of folding was introduced and 2020 is dual screen?
No, I think 2020 we're going to see the folding technology mature. I think that's like before we had the beta. Maybe even the alpha products, right? Because the Galaxy Fold, it was recalled. Like it wasn't ready. And it
was like literally not even a final product.
Yeah, it wasn't even, they didn't make it. So I think in 2020, I think Samsung's refined the manufacturing. They got a lot of feedback. They understand how people are now using these devices. And I think they're going to introduce new folding phones. And I think we're going to see that from other manufacturers as well. I mean, Microsoft's coming out with their Surface Duo, and that is a dual screen approach to a folding phone. And I think, we're going to have the Razer coming out. And I think 2020 will be the year that we'll see or start to see good or maybe just better folding phones and folding tech.
But for consumers, does this really even have an impact on their day-to-day usage or like what they're going to want to buy? Because for me personally, if I was looking at, an iPhone folding, I mean, there's no signs that Apple's going to release a folding iPhone this year, but if I was looking at, all right, iPhone 2020 versus, a folding iPhone, and even if they were the same price and the folding one wasn't more expensive, I would most likely just go for the regular one because I feel like it's, at least for the time being, it's a tried and tested form. It works. I like it. I don't really see any reason to go with two screens at this point. And this regular version is more durable. So for me, they haven't really made the argument yet of why I need two screens.
Yeah, it's not better.
Folding,
it's just new and different, and it's like cool for tech people into tech. Like, oh man, this is the bleeding edge. But you haven't really taken the time to step back and ask, is this better? Like, does this actually make sense? Is this improving the user experience in any way? Are you doing things you previously couldn't do? So I think that's a good point.
Will we see them make that argument better this year and refine that argument to the point where more people want to jump in, or do you think that's going to take a couple more years?
I think it's going to take a couple more years because, as you mentioned with the screen sizes, developers with the new size had to then optimize their apps. And I think the same thing is true with a folding phone or even a dual screen phone. The software needs to be optimized. The apps need to be optimized to take advantage of that, of the processing power or the new features for multitasking or whatever these manufacturers are introducing. And I think really the experience won't be refined until 2021. That's what I'm thinking.
But what will we see for phones this year? It looks like, we know the Galaxy Fold 2 or whatever they're going to call it, the Z Flip, is possibly coming out, I think, at this February 11th Unpacked event, I think, right?
Yeah, I think I'd love to just kind of take some time to go through these. So I think coming up this month, actually, so we're looking at the Samsung Unpacked event, and we're going to look at the Galaxy S20.
Well, let's just talk about the folding phones that we're going to see this year.
Yeah, folding phones, perfect. So Galaxy Fold 2, I've seen some saying the Galaxy Z Flip, and from what I've seen in the concept renders, we could be looking at, instead of one phone, actually two phones. We could have the Fold 2, and we could have the Galaxy Z Flip. And my understanding of the current differences is the Fold 2 will be just a second generation Galaxy Fold, kind of folds up like a book, and the Z Flip will be more similar to a flip phone, like the Motorola Razr, that will actually be a vertical flip. And I think, based on the rumors and the renders I've seen, those could be the two possibilities we see at Samsung Unpacked.
And you said the Motorola Razr, we'll be seeing that later this year, right, too?
Yeah, I think we'll be seeing that later this year. I put it, I think, tentatively around April. I think they're hoping for like a spring release. Do you have any information on that or more?
Not really. I know they announced it in the fall to try to get ahead of, other ones, but now the phone, I feel like, has sat around for a little bit. They haven't been, updating it, new production specs and such. So it's going to be kind of like the Autel EVO II drone, where it's going to be slightly like, not as flashy when it gets to market, actually. I still think the folding design of the hinge is kind of cool, and is a novel approach. But yeah, I don't think that this is going to be all that people thought it'd be originally.
I really think it's going to tank. I think I've heard like a rumored $1,500 or $1,800 price tag. And to be honest with you, Gabe, like this Motorola Razr, because it was in development for so long and then announced so early, it's now actually, it has older specs. Like the phone itself isn't going to be that powerful, and I just don't think it's going to be a good experience.
So that's like a little bit sad to see, but I know one phone that was announced last year. What is it, the Neo or the Duo by Microsoft?
It is the Duo. Yeah, tell me more about the Duo.
That one looks like that because they didn't really release specs on it. And, they didn't release, this is our production model, now we're just going to go make it, kind of like Motorola. They just said, all right, this is what it's going to look like. Now it's coming out in 2020. And that's, like you said earlier, the dual screen, that's more of that approach to folding than actually the one folding screen. Yeah,
I'm excited for that. Which folding phone do you think you'd be most excited for? Which one do you think you would end up, I'm assuming you're not actually going to purchase any of them, but like of these folding phones, which one are you most exciting about, or which one do you think is doing it best? Because we have the Book Fold, we have the vertical fold, and then we have the dual screen fold. What's your take?
I would probably want to go with the dual screen fold just because it seems at this point more reliable. You still get, the premium quality glass screens versus the Samsung Galaxy Fold has like that plastic screen. Still, I was just thinking about it though. I mean, I'll turn the question back to you in a second, but I was just thinking that, Apple is always criticized because they're so late to come to market with like, all right, it's whatever the, fingerprint readers, they're the last ones to get it to market. Or, right now their phones are shooting 12 megapixel sensors where everyone else is up in the 40s or higher, and they'll be, late to the party there. But what they do very well is they, refine it and get it to the point where once they bring it and introduce it as a product or as like a new feature, it's done so well, and they've learned from all the mistakes that all the other companies have made that it's not, I won't say perfect because that's going to sound like an Apple fanboy, but it's done very well that they don't have all the issues that other companies go through. Like if Samsung, right, they release the Fold and they release the Fold 2, you're like, oh, well, at least they're innovating, continuing. But a lot of times with a product like that, and when you're continuing a product line, issues that popped up in the first one will still persist in the second and third just because you're trying to continue with the same form factor, the same, internal structure, stuff like that. Whereas if you're starting from the ground up, bringing a new product that's you've learned all these other things from other companies, you're starting on a very good foundation.
Yeah, I think to Samsung's, they would have to basically almost scrap the design of their Fold and start over. And that, I mean, I don't think they can do it. They announced the Fold so early to be one of the first, if not, I think they were the first commercially available folding phone. And, they did that, and good for them. Props to them for pulling that off. But I think to really refine the user experience, you do kind of have to see, how the market responds to these things, how people are using them, what the biggest flaws and drawbacks have been. And then with that information, you can then pioneer or begin to build a better version of the folding phone. So in a sense, Samsung is paving the way for Apple. Like Apple can see what's working, what's not working, and then implement that feedback into their own product. But Samsung, they either have to like refine and improve the Fold, or just take the feedback and come out with a totally new phone, which could be the Galaxy Z Flip.
Z Flip,
right?
That's what I was going to say. Like, would you consider that one?
Yeah. Actually, I'm like kind of answering my own question or having you ask it. I would go with the vertical flip, and the reason I think I would go with the vertical flip is because if you're using a dual screen phone, I feel like it's almost like using two iPad minis. They're chunky, and I don't think physically my fingers and hands could comfortably hold and use that kind of form factor. Like, I just don't know how I would use it. And so the Z Flip, or a flip phone like the Razr, it basically is a regular smartphone form factor that just folds in half. And I already know how to use a regular smartphone, and I think that to me would provide the best experience. So that's what I would go for.
And with screens getting longer, like we said, and taller and thinner, that seems to make the most sense too.
Yeah, because then suddenly it's super long and tall, and you get all that great content when you need it. And when you don't, boop, just fold it right back up, slide it into your pocket. And I guess another weird perk of these phones is the Motorola Razr has a screen. I don't know how to describe it. It's when it's closed, the clamshell is closed, the screen is on the top where the camera is. And all of a sudden, you can see yourself while you're taking a picture with that main camera. So I think that's actually kind of like an added benefit, is potentially having a screen on the back and getting better photos that way.
So you only need one camera.
You may only need one camera for video calls and stuff. I mean, you'd want one on the front.
True.
But you could then use the higher quality 48 or 108 megapixel camera just to take your selfie photos in a sense and get way better image quality. That's what I would go for.
So what phone, now moving away from folding phones to your main, flagship phones from each company, what one are you thinking will be the most exciting advancements we'll see this year? Because it seems like for every company, they have, 1 year is like, all right, this is the big, updates with new features, new specs. And then the next year is kind of like, all right, let's just refine it a little bit and make some small tweaks.
For me, there are so many phones that get released every year, and so many of them go under the radar, particularly Samsung's budget phones, I want to say. I'm an Apple fanboy, and so I'm obviously excited for the iPhone. And that could be huge because this is the year we're expecting to see a physical hardware redesign with the iPhone 2020. But to be honest, I do feel like it may be more incremental in updates. Like, I'm not sure exactly what we'll see. I think maybe we'll get that higher refresh rate display, 120 hertz, 90 hertz, maybe 5G. But I guess physical hardware of the iPhone 2020, if they're able to get rid of the notch, or maybe they'll add in the under-screen fingerprint reader. I think that could be really cool. But I want to actually go a different route. I think my answer to this question, it'll either be the Pixel 4a, bringing amazing camera quality at an affordable price, or maybe even the Pixel 5, because the Pixel 4 was just so bad.
That's what you took. You took mine. I was going to say that.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to take it, Gabe.
It's all right.
Yeah, I just felt...
Great minds think alike.
I just felt it was so... I mean, yeah, do you want to explain it then? I kind of talked about the iPhone and how...
I mean, well, it's basically like what you're going to say is, I'm imagining, is that the Pixel 4 was just such a disappointment that basically anything they release for the Pixel 5 is going to be, a huge improvement over the previous generation, and to get up to, to the same level as other manufacturers and other flagship phones, they're going to have to make such a jump that that's going to be the big phone of this year, I feel like.
Yeah, I'm completely on board with you, and yeah, I think that's going to be the move. I mean, I just think the overall improvement, like, it's going to get the most improved player award for sure. I hope, right?
Will we see all manufacturers jumping to that, super high 108 megapixels, 60 megapixels, 40 megapixels? Or do you think people like Apple and Google are still going to hang around on those lower megapixel counts and just work on improving like the software, the lenses, and stuff like that? That's the interesting.
Yeah, I think that is a good point. So, I guess to comment on this, we basically saw, I think it's Sony, right? Sony manufactures the sensor.
Yeah, Sony is by far, they manufacture sensors for Canon. They manufacture all the sensors in your smartphone. Like, Sony pretty much makes the majority of sensors out in the world for cameras.
That's amazing. So Sony made the 108 megapixel sensor and the 48 megapixel sensor.
Yep.
And to be honest, I think we'll just see kind of like Snapdragon, or I guess Qualcomm, excuse me. Qualcomm made the Snapdragon. It's the 865, I think. And, that's just going to be used by all the major flagships. Like, that's the processor of the year. That's going to be the fastest, the bleeding edge. And I think the same is true with the camera. I think this 108 megapixel sensor, it's just going to be the best bleeding edge camera that's going to be out. So I do feel like most, if not all, Android flagships will incorporate this camera sensor, which means everyone is suddenly going to have 108 megapixel photos on their phone. How wild is that?
Well, I think it doesn't actually use the 108 megapixels all the time. Like, you have to put it into a specific mode, because I think we've talked about it before on the podcast, how these new super high resolution sensors work is basically they're super small. So up till now, the reason why you haven't seen those high resolution counts is if they did that, you'd get the most grainy photos possible, because those pixels are absolutely tiny. If I think a smartphone camera sensor is like maybe this like a quarter the size of a dime, probably even like
they're
definitely
so small. Yeah.
You can easily fit them on like a dime and have room for like 5 more around them. So they're absolutely tiny. And what they're doing with these new ones is they're actually finding ways to group, if you have a 48 megapixel sensor, for example, they're grouping them so that it's actually, groups of 4 pixels into one can be using for a 12 megapixel sensor if it's low light. But if you have, good lighting and stuff and you really want the high megapixel count, they can actually read each pixel independently, so they can be at 48 megapixels. So it's basically finding ways to group megapixels or pixels into one, for to get the same effect as having a lower resolution sensor, but then able to separate them and use them for a high resolution readout.
Yeah, and I think with that implementation, I think this sensor will perform really well and therefore just be used on all the devices. So yeah, that's my take. Do you see this proliferating across all the flagships? Like it's spreading, like the triple camera setup that we saw spread like a disease last year?
It's kind of hard. I mean, I guess, yeah, you're going to just assume that it's going to especially for Android, it's going to just kind of spread across, for Samsung, Huawei, Motorola, who else is there out there? LG, HTC. Is HTC even around? I don't think so. Not
Oh,
really.
whoa, yeah.
Yeah.
They honestly fell off the
They
radar.
got bought by Google. So yeah, I mean, you're like, your main Android manufacturers are definitely or Xiaomi as well, are gonna be switching to the 108 process or sensor on their flagship models. The question really, I think, is Google and Apple, on their models.
Yeah, I don't think Apple's going to be using this one. I don't think it makes sense to them.
I think they'll definitely up their megapixel count. I think that's pretty much a given.
You think so? I mean,
I think we'll see. I think we'll see 20 megapixels at least, possibly even 30 on the main camera. I still think that the telephoto and the wide angle might stick with a lower resolution sensors, but it's kind of hard at this point when these other Android phones are coming out with sensors that are almost 10 times the amount of megapixels as your sensor. I mean, I know it's not all about megapixels, but it comes to a point where your average consumer is like, hold on a second, why would I buy this one phone over the other?
I think I disagree with that. My take is I think Apple has proved over the past couple of years that megapixels don't really matter. I think they'll focus more or continue to focus on color science, making all of their lenses look the same, which is, actually surprising how dramatic this is. So the new iPhone 11 Pro and the iPhone 11, they have the ultra wide, the regular, and the Pro has the telephoto. But the difference between a wide, an ultra wide, and a regular can be dramatic on some Android flagships. Like I think the OnePlus phone, if you go to that ultra wide, the image quality just falls apart. So I think Apple will actually focus on making all cameras consistent, great, high quality, and that will be their selling point to me.
And also, I guess the other camera trend we've seen is that optical zoom. That's like using the the mirrors within the lens to warp it and bend it around, so you get actually a 5x optical zoom in something that's like doesn't even protrude from the back of the smartphone. So that obviously is going to be coming to more Android phones. Will Apple introduce something like that possibly?
That's a great question. I could see that. I think I enjoy the telephoto lens, that closer to 50 millimeter look, and so I think they could do something like that, something cool. They also pretty much lead the pack in terms of video quality. I could definitely see them going maybe in a more video oriented route.
Get a 6K video, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, why not, right? 4K was introduced in 2015 with the iPhone 6S, and it's been 5 years. I don't see why not, upgrade that to 6K.
I think we'd probably see 5.3K or 5.7K first, though. I don't think they'd go right to 6K.
Sure, that's a weird number though. So maybe I would almost say they would skip it. Like they'd go 4K, and then when they're ready to do 6K, they just do all out, and that could be in a couple years. Gabe, this is an interesting question. Do you think we'll ever see phones get proper zooming lenses, like on a point and shoot camera, that can just physically zoom in and zoom out?
No, I don't think that will ever happen, mainly because just form factor. You don't want to have there's no way to really do that. It's all like optics based around, having to have a certain distance between each glass element to get the right zoom. So the only way up till now has been either digitally or now with the new, using the mirrors to bend it around inside the lens and then, bend it, bounce that light out. So I don't think we'll ever see it. The only thing that I was going to say, though, is folding phones might present some way to have it so that it folds and, there's a space in the phone where the lens can kind of disappear into, or, basically because you're folding the phone in half potentially, there could be some way that, the lens sits in this little like cutout on the other side of the phone or something like that.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll have to wait and see. I tend to agree with you. I just, I heard that come up on another podcast and I thought, it was interesting and I'd ask, but I actually do agree with you. I think we're more likely to see phones get like 6 cameras with the same or with different focal lengths to accommodate for that. So you can just switch between the different lenses as opposed to getting a proper zoom lens. How many cameras do you think we will see on phones this year?
Yeah, right. What will be the maximum amount that? Because last year we saw the jump from 3 to 4 actually, and even 5 with the just when you have the light sensing sensor as well. I think we'll definitely start seeing some more 4 camera arrays, which is basically you get the ultra wide, the wide, the regular one, the telephoto, and then you get one that's actually black and white. That's better for that the low light and just compensating for the fact that you're packing a ton of pixels onto one sensor. You can have a 2 megapixel sensor that's low light and black and white, so that that'll help give a better readout there. Or you could also have the inclusion. I think that isn't it rumored that the iPhone will have a 3D sensing array potentially on the back for the ability to have more AR stuff on apps and etc. on the phone.
I think I actually agree with you there. I think 3 cameras is honestly like that. Those focal lengths are all that we need. And it's just a matter of adding some extra sensors and elements to really get depth data, because we're using that depth data for AR, as you mentioned, and for better portrait mode. Samsung last year on, I want to say their Note 10, they introduced portrait mode during video recording, which is absolutely wild. I never actually ended up watching reviews to see how well that worked, but I do think we'll basically see 3 camera sensors, maybe a 4th for black and white, and then a couple extra for some additional depth data. And I guess if you count like the front facing, I almost want to see like a better like ultra wide angle front facing selfie camera. I think it's such a fun lens to use, and it's so great for video calling that I would almost want to see like 2 cameras on the front just for that.
Yeah, that would be pretty interesting, seeing portrait mode on the front, or some. I mean, you already have the face mapping on the front, right, for the Face ID unlock. So I guess it's just kind of making those two work together better. But we've been talking a lot about flagship phones. One thing I've been thinking, actually, as I've looked at like what phones we're going to see this year, is that we'll see a lot more budget phones kind of coming out as a result of companies noticing that, oh, our prices have gone up. People have stopped upgrading every 2-3 years to now waiting 4 or 5 years. Let's try to give them some more budget phones so we can get them coming back more often. And I mean, starting off with just Apple, they're going to be releasing a phone that's going to be possibly under $500, which is basically unheard of in the past, 3 years or 4 years of Apple iPhones.
Well, I think, right, their most recent one was the iPhone SE. I guess, wow, was that like actually 5? It was 2016 when it came out. So 4 years ago.
4 years ago.
Yeah. I guess it isn't unheard of, because they did the iPhone 5C and then they did the iPhone SE. But yeah, so Gabe, what are we looking at for the iPhone that's coming out, the budget iPhone this year? When is that happening? And I guess what is there to get excited about? Like, why are we excited about this phone?
I mean, there's not much to get excited about, as in it's not going to see like any, bleeding edge specs or incredible features, but it's basically going to be like a slightly updated version of the iPhone 8, which is why some people think it's going to be called the iPhone 9 or even the iPhone 8S possibly. We're not really sure on the name, but it'll basically, be similar to the iPhone 8 design, same type with the screen, most likely I think Touch ID in there. And then it's going to have, of course, though, a faster chip so that it can have, the ability to run all the apps and, work like a current smartphone, just not have, 6 cameras on the back and, all the bells and whistles.
Yeah, I was thinking or reading it would have the same processor as the iPhone 11. So it would be a really fast phone. And I think the same camera as well. So really, the only compromise is the design. You're getting a stale, basically 5-year-old phone design at this point. But you're getting such great performance and specs and image quality at a reasonable price for Apple.
It's kind of like they took like a 5-year-old Honda, right, and then gutted the chassis, used the same chassis though and same body design and everything, but put in a new engine that's more efficient and everything. Put in a new operating like computer system in the car and stuff like that. But it's still your basic shape and design of the old car.
This actually prompts a question that I was thinking about. Of these phones, quickly going through a couple, we're going to have the Samsung flagships, the S20, the Fold, we're going to have the Note 20, we're going to have the iPhone 9 or the budget iPhone, and then the flagship iPhones of this year. Of course, we're going to have Google's Pixel phones, OnePlus 8 phones, and the Microsoft Duo. Out of all these devices, which one do you think is going to provide the best user experience?
That is, I'd be inclined to go iPhone because I generally think they provide better user experiences. And if I was going to go with an Android, I would definitely say not one of the folding phones because those are, again, very, beta products, kind of testing out the concept. I would probably go with maybe a Pixel or the OnePlus. I think OnePlus has really been working, with their OnePlus 8, OnePlus 8 Pro possibly. They've really been working on the user experience and making a product that works well. I mean, the fact that they were one of the first companies to include that faster refresh rate, they were looking at, this is something that, makes it better to use, easier to scroll through, easier to look at. So I think possibly that. But also, if you look at Google, the stuff they've been doing with trying to make their phones have the ability to, help people reduce their usage time and stuff like that with, what do they call it? Like
Google, it's digital well-being.
Yeah, the digital well-being app and the, releasing certain new apps in that suite, in that area. I think that could be also one of the, phones to watch, the Pixel 5.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and what prompted the question was, what are the best budget phones, or, what are the budget phones coming out this year? And I think the budget phones actually provide a better user experience than the flagship phones. And hear me out. Think of like the Pixel, for example. Pixel 4a, rumored to have a fingerprint reader on the back, a headphone jack. And, those two little things just make the phone so much better to use. You can plug in your headphones. You can aux in the car. And the fingerprint reader on the back is it's the perfect location. The phone is unlocked as you're taking it out of your pocket. It feels comfortable and great. As opposed to, you mentioned OnePlus. They've done great things with their software, but having an underneath the screen fingerprint reader, like the phone needs to shine light on your fingerprint to get an actual readout. So if it's darker outside or you just wake up in the morning, you want to unlock your phone, you put your finger on the screen and boom, suddenly it's just blinding a super bright portion of the screen.
What I was saying is because they've had that in the past year, right, with their stuff, I think this year they might have improved that to where it's a better user experience.
I guess I could see that, but I really do. Like even the budget iPhone, like I think just Touch ID, it's a tried and true design. It's going to be a great experience. So, and like, I don't know. How do you feel about underneath the screen fingerprint readers? Do you think the iPhone this year will have one? Do you think they're the right move? Are they better than the fingerprint readers we had in the past?
I'm not really sold on them yet because they seem still very, like, you haven't really, once you see a concept and like a design feature become really standard in the industry, like the way we saw the original Touch ID, where it was kind of like, all right, there's a button or a certain area where you touch, and that's going to be how it scans your fingerprint. All right, that's good. With the kind of invisible Touch ID or fingerprint sensors, we haven't really seen any kind of design trend take off or any way of really executing that has become standardized. And that's because companies are still searching for a way to really do this well and to do this inexpensively. So I think that's really my take on that, is that it's not to the point where it's going to become something that's easier because every company's still looking for the right way.
I think they would have to do it almost on the entire bottom half of the display. Like,
didn't we see one company do that?
Yeah, they had a pretty large area. I want to say it was demoed at a tech conference. I can't remember the details of that, but yeah, I mean, with a physical home button, there's an indentation where you can feel where the fingerprint reader is, and you can kind of rest it there as you're taking it out of your pocket, and the phone's unlocked and ready to go. With the screen, you basically have to turn the screen on, see where to place your finger, and then you're into the phone. In my opinion, it adds extra steps and takes longer. So if it was, let's say, the bottom half of the screen, then suddenly you can just take your phone out and slap your finger down, and hopefully you'd be good to go. So yeah, I think it needs to either mature, or I would advocate for just bringing back the rear-facing fingerprint readers. That's my hot take.
I don't know. I never was really a fan of the rear-facing fingerprint readers because if you have your phone sitting on a table, right? Where it's, face up and you just want to, Face ID for one isn't optimal there oftentimes because you have to
you have to lean over.
Yeah, right.
How
and you're,
awkward is
sitting
that?
in a
How
cafe
frequently
and
do you
people
do
are like,
that?
what is going on? Oh, it happens way too much for me. But so I think that was my main gripe with the back placed fingerprint sensor is that you have to flip over your phone or slide your finger underneath in order to, unlock your phone. I guess you can use a passcode, but the whole point is to not do that. So I think really that's why the back placed fingerprint sensors. Or what about if they could just make them anywhere? You just literally touch your phone and it scans your hand or whatever.
It's palm based, maybe palm based on the back. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what about the face unlock?
No, this is actually the serious question that we have to answer. What are they doing with their naming schema this year? Because a lot of companies are going to 2020 or something based off 20 as it's a pretty cool beginning of the decade way to mark that this is a new exciting phone. However, what the hell is this going to do to their the current pattern that they've been doing of counting up? If they go from 11 and 12 or wherever they are in their sequence to 20, what do they do then?
2021? Do they go back in time?
Or no, I guess do we now actually finally get into them naming him after the year then? Maybe.
I think that's my take. Well, some of them are just ignoring it completely, like Huawei. They're going to announce their
or do you then you could get 20, you would get the iPhone 2020 Mark II or Gen 2 or whatever, or 2020s, and that's coming out in 2022. It just, it could get really bad is my worry.
Yeah, I guess that is true because if they do the year this year, the problem isn't really next year. It's that many phone companies, and OnePlus is a great example of this, they'll do a pro phone, and then they'll do a more budget phone, and then how do you name those? We'll have the 2020s, the 2020 Pro Max, and then I guess next year, maybe they do it by year. It's just the 2020 Pro and the 2020, and then the 2020.
That does for people, for companies like Apple or for Samsung, and ones that are already getting up super high in the numbers and have kind of messed up their whole naming thing by trying to do an X and trying to do stuff like that. I think that actually makes the most sense. They're releasing usually pretty much a pro smartphone every year. They're releasing a large smartphone, a smaller smartphone, and then they're releasing a budget smartphone. Doing it just by the year and then coming up with, all right, we're calling one the Pro, one the XL, one the just the standard one, and maybe one the E or the economy or light or something like that.
That to me would make everything so much easier. At a glance, you could tell what year a phone was released. You could know exactly what to look for. So that is what I would be in favor for. Okay, plot twist. What if they just start counting down?
They would. You just keep dividing it indefinitely.
Yeah, you just go down.
So, I don't think that would work. And also,
we'll have another iPhone 10.
In all seriousness, just keep going up, and then when they get to a certain point, go down. That would that's not, okay. We can rule that out. That's not going to happen. Well, actually, hold on. They were going to just release the iPhone 9, so that is kind of going down.
Well, it's up from the 8, but they already had the 10. But the 10 was a Roman numeral.
And they already had the 11. They
X.
already had the 11 though, and that wasn't a Roman numeral.
Oh,
yeah. It is getting messy. That's the big thing. But I don't think they're going to switch over to years. Actually, even while they might do a 2020 edition or a 20 edition, I don't think they're going to switch to years because the big thing for phone companies is they want to be able to release a phone like Apple does, or Samsung does in, the third, fourth quarter of the year and still be able to sell that phone in the first and second quarter of the next year, right? So if they release the iPhone 2020 and then, next year people are looking in May to buy an iPhone, and they're like, I don't want to buy the iPhone 2020. It's the reminder is right in the title of the phone.
Yeah, it's last year's phone. I don't want that versus the iPhone 11. Oh, it's the new iPhone. Of course I want the latest and greatest iPhone. That is a great point, Gabe. Well, I don't know. I think, Samsung, it seems like they're going to do it this year with the S20. But would they go back next year and then do the what are they on? Would it be the S12, the S13? That seems weird.
But the really confusing thing is didn't they have phones that were called the A20 or the A30 or something like that.
Oh yeah, their budget line, like the J20, like oh yeah. I mean,
So this is actually the thing that smartphone companies really need to work on. Put all your money to developing an actual naming scheme that makes sense, is good for your marketing, and is sustainable in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting challenge. It is an interesting challenge for sure. And I mean, maybe what if they just drop the number altogether?
And just call it the iPhone.
It's
And
the
then
new
next
iPhone.
year you also have the iPhone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or you have the Samsung Galaxy.
Remember when they did that for iPad? It was just the new iPad. That was also confusing.
True. But then is it called the new iPhone? Or is it just called the iPhone?
It's the new iPhone this year, everybody. And then next year, it's the new iPhone. It's the new iPhone. Well, I guess like my thinking was for their computer lineup. They have the MacBook, the MacBook Pro, and the MacBook Air. And that,
but the thing is, I think with that is that they aren't trying to get people to upgrade every year, and they also aren't releasing upgrades every year.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. All right. Okay. Yeah, I mean,
that's why we spent more time talking about this than any other aspect of the phones coming out next year, because this is actually the most complicated thing.
It doesn't sound like I do not have a clear answer. I mean, the year seems to make the most sense to me, but to your point about just that mindset, like, oh, I don't want to get last year's phone, that maybe they'll just go back to numbers. Yeah. That right. I don't know. I do not know.
Yeah, the two last things is, will we see a new operating system start making way from Huawei? Will that actually be good?
Yeah.
And will we see Apple go to USB-C?
Okay, I have two opinions on this, and I'll be very interested to hear your take. I think from Huawei, we will see a new operating system because their biggest market, I think, is in China. And I think they could easily, drop Android, build their own system, have their own apps, and actually do quite well. So that's my hot take there. The P40 Pro that's rumored to come out this year around March, I think it'll do well in China, in that marketplace. And for the iPhone getting USB Type-C, my take is this. I've heard that the UK is implementing new legislation mandating...
Not the UK, the EU, I
excuse
think,
me,
right?
Excuse me. The EU is making
which actually now no longer includes the UK.
Oh, how ironic is that? Oh, I'm so misinformed. Anyway, I think because of the new legislation, I think Apple will continue doing USB-C, but include a dongle in the box.
No, you mean include Lightning.
Lightning. Wow. All right. So I think Apple will continue doing Lightning and include a Lightning to USB-C adapter in the box. That's my take.
I probably agree with you there, because even though they have switched over the iPad Pro to USB-C, they still have most of the iPad line on the original Lightning. And I think that's currently the way they're going to keep going. Because they can keep selling, those Lightning cables for so much money that people buy, rather than being, having the market flooded with USB-C cables. And also because they, actually their AirPods also use Lightning. Yeah,
well,
chargers.
Here's the thing.
So
their iPads, the non-Pro iPads, use Lightning. Their phones use Lightning. Their AirPods use Lightning. Their Beats use Lightning. Their Magic keyboards use Lightning. And as silly as it looks, their Magic Mouse uses Lightning. All of these accessories use Lightning, so I just don't see them switching to USB Type-C. I think they're either going to throw an adapter in there, or they're just going to do no ports at all on the iPhone.
Yeah, and it is kind of actually a nice thing for their loyal Apple users, because I know, like if you pick up the iPad Pro or something, you're probably a little more experienced. But if you pick it up and you're not, and it's kind of a bit of a shock to be like, oh wait, how do I even plug this in? Like, what do I use?
You put a Lightning cable in there and it just doesn't fit. Like, it kind of rattles around. Like, what is going on?
So I can definitely see, with their more mainstream products, that it's their bread and butter, them not wanting to upset their loyal user base by making them switch all their cables over all of a sudden, or carry around two sets of cables.
Yeah, I'd be okay with an adapter though, because that suddenly means like having that adapter means I can use the same charger and the same cable, and it's just a matter
True.
of throwing the adapter on. So yeah, I think
I guess we'll have to wait and see. We definitely won't see that in the iPhone 9 or SE. That would be maybe in the 2020 iPhone or whatever.
sure,
they're
yeah,
calling it.
later in the year. Yeah, but I think that's all I have. Do you have any closing remarks? Anything else?
No, I mean, well, actually, the one thing I was thinking when we were making up notes and researching for this episode is we didn't actually touch on Energizer's phones. And I know last year at Mobile World Congress, Energizer, which I may remind people is the company that makes batteries, they released like 40 different phone models last year at Mobile World Congress, and we never really kind of touched back on them. So I guess you'll have to wait till our Mobile World Congress wrap-up episode later this month to hear about that. But I don't know. That just was kind of like a shock, kind of like TCL releasing all their phones this year. These are even more budget phones, but they're from a company you wouldn't expect.
Yeah, sometimes, new products come out and you just forget to track them. So I'd be interested to hear the Energizer story, how well the phones did, and if they have a new herd of 40 new budget phones ready to take on the market with their Energizer Bunny. So we'll keep our eyes out for that. Anyway, That's going to wrap up this episode. Be sure to follow us on social media at Pinch to Zoom Pod on Twitter, at Pinch to Zoom Pod. Wait, it's Pinch to Zoom Podcast?
Pinch to Zoom Pod on Twitter, Pinch to Zoom Podcast on Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then email us, pinchtozoom.podcast@gmail.com. And yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, we even have a website too, if you want to check out the website. It's not very extensive, so don't go expecting much. And we're also on YouTube. I know some people actually like listening to podcasts on YouTube. I personally am not a big fan of it, but it's pretty incredible how much views and stuff some of the top podcasts get on YouTube. And it makes actually, I guess our ending question would be, would you expect YouTube to ever leverage that and launch a like specific podcast platform? Or even like I know when you're uploading a video to YouTube, they don't have a category for podcasts.
I mean, I feel like we could somehow incorporate this and turn it into its own episode. But what I love about YouTube is you have comments and people can leave comments and discuss the topic of the video or the topic of the podcast and provide feedback and input. So I would love to see YouTube optimize and take advantage of this opportunity. So I don't know. That's my quick remark. We don't want to get too into it as we're closing out here. But yeah, that's going to wrap up this episode. Thank you guys so much for listening. I'm Stetson.
I'm Gabe.
And we look forward to speaking with you in the next episode. I was going to say recording the ending of the podcast is almost harder than recording the actual podcast.
True. Yeah, that's just recording the podcast is just the warm-up for trying to record the ending.
Yeah, thank God we have a great editor, right, Gabe?
Thank God I'm not going to be able to use any of this because it's far too long to be actually used as an ending of an episode.